Okay, hello guys. It's Yoshin. I know you can't see me, but it's me. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about our test 1, 2019, auditing 3A. Okay, so if you don't have your test papers, please go and get them. This is my copy. So pause the video and go and get them. Also guys, this is our new hover cam that the university has bought, and so this is my first time trying it out. So I hope it goes well, and you guys can comment and tell me what you guys think of it, and whether I should do more videos like this. Okay, cool. So this was our test. As you guys know, it was a 90 minutes test for 50 marks. We're dealing with a company which was a listed company. Here, let me just move it down. So it was a listed company. We had some information that may have seemed as if it is relating to the PI score. Many people actually used these figures in calculating the PI score. But I think the most important thing about them, and the reason why you couldn't calculate them, is because there was actually no average employees. These were all actual figures at a point in time, and as a result, you actually could not calculate your PI score. Yeah, so most of quite a few of you actually did that. Okay, and then you guys would have read through this and you would have sort of gained an understanding about how it's a foreign held company. So it's held by a Chinese holding company, and also you guys would have realized that here the partner has actually asked the manager to conclude on whether or not to accept the engagement. And we know that the partner is not allowed to do that, so the partner himself has to actually decide on that. He can't outsource that to someone else. Okay, so that's worth pointing out. Okay, so let's have a look at the first working paper. Right. So you guys were given this working paper. It was actually a acceptance review. We need to pay attention now to the dates. So notice that the date, the year end, is actually 28 February, and we are doing this review on the 15th of February, which means there's 2 weeks, and we plan to do the entire audit in those 2 weeks, which most people would realize is not possible for a listed client. The other thing that's important is that the reviewer of the document was the audit manager. But just a few seconds ago, we said that actually the preparer, right? So if you guys look here, you, who being the partner, requested the audit manager to prepare the acceptance review. So the audit manager is actually the preparer and the reviewer of this document, which is a problem. Okay. Then as you guys go through the document, you're going to see that the justifications or the conclusions that the audit manager has come to were actually incorrect conclusions. For example, in the first bullet, we found that there was a material independence threat, yet the person did not pick it up, and they said no, that everything is okay and everything is fine. Okay. We move on to the next page. What's important here is that if you have a look at the bottom, you find that there's a procedure that we need to do. So we needed to inquire with management with regard to if there are any concerns, ethical concerns that we must take into account. And the findings are evidently not documented. And as we know, if something is not documented, then we cannot assume that it has been done. Okay, so that's important, that it wasn't documented, right? So the working paper is in fact not complete. Okay, even though we we've arrived at a conclusion at the bottom, the working paper is not complete. Okay, now in the next working paper, so this is an understanding the document working paper. This is a working paper that is very popular in audit. In the next working paper, we actually find that the date of this working paper is before the acceptance of the client. Let's have a look at that. This is the 10th of February, whereas the acceptance of the client is the 15th. You can see that there. So, if we've got a situation where we've actually started audit work before we accepted the client, this is not an acceptable situation. And so this is what we faced with here. And students, many, in fact all, did not look at the date, so they weren't paying careful attention to the dates. We find that they have some subcommittees. We're told a little bit about Peter Pan and Oliver Twist. And then we discussed the financial performance at the bottom. We then go on to the third working paper. Again, this working paper is dated on the 12th, so before we accepted the client. And here is where we are told about the environment, more importantly, the computer control environment. Okay, and that becomes important later on. Right. So this idea of a centralized accounting system or accounting services is something that we discussed many times in class during lectures. You guys would remember that I would stress that a centralized accounting system is a system in which there was one location where multiple accounting things were done. So accounting processing for the entire group was done in one location. And we spoke about that in class. Many of you will remember we said that the problem with that is things may be, the control activities at a specific venue may not be in line with the way we want it, or we may have a situation where we cannot get documents quickly. Documents may be altered before they are received, so lead times and such things. We chatted about that as well. Then we've got here a little bit more information, and we're told about the internal audit. Not much is mentioned about the internal audit though, and that was during reading time. So now let's move on to the required. Again, I have to point out, and it's actually silly because you guys are in third year, but I have to point out point form, bullet point or point form. That is something that the majority of you all fail to do. You'll all write in large paragraphs. Many of you all, as I've mentioned before, just write in one paragraph that lasts 7 pages. And then another important thing is neat writing. Okay, so many of you would have received on your page where I said, you'll receive a comment where I say, listen, your writing is not up to scratch. So yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the required. So remember, we received the required after reading time. The required here says we need to discuss with reference to the scenario and specifically the working paper, the acceptance working paper, your concerns regarding the acceptance of FB, okay, as a client. Now that word, your concerns, caused a lot of confusion with people. They assumed that when they read concerns, they should write questions. Okay. I'm unsure of why you concluded that concerns means questions. It is quite evident that concerns does not mean questions. What it really means is you need to indicate what you find as a problem with this working paper. So let's talk about where this sort of question is coming from. Okay, so what you guys would know is audit managers actually review the work of audit trainees quite regularly, right? So all the work that a trainee does has to be reviewed by the audit manager. This is what you were expected to do in this question. So I was in fact asking you to review the work of the audit manager. okay, to review the work of the preparer of the document. I was not asking for a list of questions, which is what many of you wrote down. Okay, it's not a list of questions. We need to analyze what is being, we need to have that critical mindset. And we often talk in class about professional skepticism. Okay, so that's what we need to use when we're answering this sort of question. Right? So we need to be that skeptic. We need to answer the questions as opposed to asking the questions. Okay, so many people fell short there by asking the questions as opposed to answering questions. I will give you an example. So, many people would have written down here, a team of 3 staff members that includes an experienced partner and manager. Okay. Now you assumed that if you ask the question, is the team large enough, you'd get the mark. That is not a concern. Right? A concern is that the client is very large and therefore the team is short. That's how we are meant to present our answer. By writing, is the team large enough, you do not get the mark. Or even, are 3 people enough to complete the audit? That's not going to get you the mark. You have to put your answer in a coherent sentence, in an argument. So you're basically trying to win an argument here. And you say, 3 people assigned to a listed client is not up to scratch, and they will never be able to complete the work in time, nor will the quality be correct, right? So that's, for example, what you expected to say. For example, many of you guys would ask the question, why does the 3rd team member have an audit, a degree in finance and not an audit-related degree? Now, that again is a question and not an answer. What you should be saying is that this person does not have the requisite skills, right, because they have studied finance instead of studying auditing. Okay, so that is an example of a concern. It's not a question. Okay, so concerns are not questions. Many people got that one wrong. Okay. Now, just give me a minute. So when we are looking again at our answers, I'm going to give you a list of things that I thought you guys could do better, right? So the solution is out on Moodle, and you can go and have a look at the solution. But remember, when you are looking at the solution, ask yourself, was your answer in line with the solution in terms of, if it wasn't a question, did you actually write a question or did you answer the question? So many students would have said, we need to look at whether the partner is independent. Right? But as a 3rd year student, you should be able to do that. You should be able to look at whether the partner is independent and come to a conclusion. Right? So you shouldn't be asking the question. And in this case, if someone has just sold off 1,000 shares and is a board member, right, you guys would know that that is not an independent person, and that's the justification, or that's the conclusion that you are meant to come to. Instead of saying, is this person independent, you are meant to say, this person is not independent because of. Okay, so I think that's where we fell short in the first required. So many of you missed the point about the communication with the previous auditor, right? So let me find that. Many of you all missed the point about the communication with the previous auditor, and you all said that because we had a telephonic conversation with the auditor, that should be enough, right? But if you go back and have a look at your standards, you will see that you can't just have a conversation with the previous auditor. So here we say you telephonically contacted the senior partner, you telephonically contacted the previous auditors of FB. So that is not sufficient. You can't just telephonically contact someone and expect that to be used as audit documentation. So it has to be written communication. can't just assume that a telephone is audit documentation. Then the other thing that many people didn't understand or fell short on is when we talk about the fees being recouped through advisory services. What you need to understand is that it is clear that the quality of the audit is now going to be reduced because we do not have enough fees, right? And this audit is only taken on because of the potential earnings in another part of the company, which means we ourselves, our independence as auditors, is being compromised because we are more interested in money coming through advisory services, right? That's what we wanted to say. The problem with here, when we talk about the Chinese executives, many people assumed that translating something from one language to another is an audit risk. That is not an audit risk, guys. Translation of language is not an audit risk. And so we can't say that the translation of engagement letter into Chinese is going to cause audit-related problems. It should not. Okay? We shouldn't really have audit. Okay, so let's now move on to the next required. Okay, the next required said here, so this is B, we're looking at B. So B says, describe the risks of material misstatement at overall financial statement level evident from the information provided. Okay. This question was very well answered. Okay, so many people got lots of marks in this question. I don't think that this necessarily is something that the class struggles with, so identifying of material misstatements. I think, though, that it is a very basic skill. So it's a skill that we should have developed and mastered in second year. So if at a third year level we are unable to identify the risks, we need to ask ourselves why this has happened and how do we improve. I think the best thing for us to do is actually to go back into last year's work, into second year's work, and actually work on that. Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I feel you guys did very well. I'm going to move on to C now. So in C, we had this change during the exam. Right? So we scratched that out and we said plan. Now, what is interesting to me is that here, these items are all related to the plan. So you guys, by just reading the question, even without the change, should have been able to pick up that either something is wrong or that we're actually talking about the plan here in this question. So you guys were meant to come up with the plan for the audit. Okay. Many people just did not know what to do. Okay. And the problem is, I spoke to you guys about how to develop a plan, and I said this is how we should do it, right? So let's say we have nature. Okay. I said that under nature we should be writing down firstly test of control and telling me what is the nature of our test of control, or if we're having test of control. And then we should go substantive tests and again talk about what is our substantive test going to look like. And we do the same for timing, right? So under timing we also have test of control and substantive tests. And under extent we also have test of control and substantive tests. I can promise you none of the questions that are marked were written in this way. Okay. None of the questions that were marked were written in this way. So you guys obviously didn't pay attention to what I was trying to tell you guys in class when writing that out, right? So we have to now get the method correct so that we can get the marks. Okay, so we want to try really and get that correct. So in the audit plan, again, it wasn't done too badly. I think the problem was that people didn't understand what an audit plan is. So with regard to an audit plan, what we really want to do is we want to tell the auditor what the correct answer is. Okay, and so, for example, we're going to get marks for saying that DraftWorks was a reputable software. We're getting marks for saying the combined approach needs to be used. We're going to get marks for mentioning CATs. We're going to get marks for mentioning a test of controls and how we're going to test controls. Revenue recognition is always an issue, and we spoke about that in class as well. With regard to the timing, many people were saying, oh, we need to use roll forward procedures. Right. And the reason why you guys were saying that is because we had used roll forward procedures, or roll forward procedures has come up so many times before. Okay, so it's come up in our tasks so many times before. The problem was that we did not have, remember we were only appointed 2 weeks before. Let's have a look at that date. Sorry guys, I'm actually sick, so that's why I'm sniffing a little bit. So if we only appointed 2 weeks before the year end, there is no way we can do early verification. So the correct answer was not that we need to consider early verification and roll forward. The correct answer was to say it's not possible to do early verification and roll forward. Right? Again, if you ask the question, you didn't get the mark. Right? You're not at the third year level. When in your audit plan, we're not expecting to see questions. Can I do roll forward or not? Can I do early verification or not? You're actually meant to tell us, yes, I'm doing it or I'm not doing it. Okay, so that's what the idea is. Okay, and as you can see, most of our questions had a lot more available marks than they were maximum marks. Okay, some people did actually do well in these questions, and I was quite happy to see that. But many people, I think, either didn't get to the end of the paper or froze when they saw audit plan. Okay, so that is our test feedback. I think the most important thing here is that we need to read the question carefully, right, before we attempt it, and then the other thing is answer the question that is asked. That 90% of the time does not include asking the examiner questions. Okay, that was my pet peeve, was that you guys were just asking me question upon question upon question, but not answering any of the questions. Okay, so instead of asking questions, let's move on now to more answering the questions. Right? We had a third year level, and at a third year level, we should understand certain basic things. The other thing that actually came up in my TUT the other day was students saying, we didn't know what delisting is. Okay, we never knew that a company can delist, can come off the JSE. The fact that you guys don't know that, yet you are taught that in math, and that you are expected to be a business professional at the end of this year, is actually telling on your behalf. Okay, so you need to know basic things like the fact that someone can delist and such. So I'm not actually happy with that sort of explanation. Oh, we didn't know. You guys are meant to know this by reading, by keeping up to date with financial mail, with financial news, and when you do that, you'll find that certain things like delisting will come up. Certain things like understanding that you can't just have a telephone and have an agreement, a telephone call and have an agreement will come up. So I'm expecting that you guys study hard for the next test. I think there's quite a lot to work on in terms of exam technique and how to answer. The solution for test 1 is up on Moodle. I would suggest not to spend too much time on that solution in terms of going over it again and redoing the test. I would rather you start to focus on the sections that are actually coming up in test 2. And so yeah, so like we said in class, and I'll repeat it here again, our scope for test 2 is week 1 to 10, which is up to and including King 4. Okay. Okay guys, so that's the end of our test feedback. I'm going to upload this video to Moodle, and if any of you guys have any comments and questions, you're welcome to email me. And all the best and happy studying for test 2. Bye.